Hey puzzlers, Steve here with another video on how to play some logic puzzles. This one's called a Tetroid. If you liked object placement puzzles or playing Tetris, I think you're going to like this one a lot. How it works is you're trying to fill the grid with Tetris pieces or tetrominos without having two shapes next to each other of the same type. So what you'll see here is there are some black cells along the grid. You do not have to cover those. It's just the white cells that you're trying to cover. So what I'm going to do is try to solve this one and share with you some common tips and tricks so you can see how the puzzle unravels. The first place I would typically start is going to be in the nooks and crannies, corners and edges, areas of the board that's going to be really constrained or forced. So for instance, this cell here, the only shape that can cover that cell is going to be an S shape, because to hit that cell you have to also hit this one, and this one. So you have to come up, over, and up, and that forms an S shape. There's nothing else that would fit in there, and we can do the same up in the corner here now. This is going to be an L shape because we have to come down, over, and that's only 3 cells, so we have to come over one more. That's an L shape there. So that's a good place to start. Now here we see these 2 cells. In order to hit those 2 cells without isolating them, you have to have a shape that also hits this cell here. And when you have that kind of shape there, the only Tetris piece that can fit in there is going to be a T shape, right? If you're a big Tetris player, you know you could do a T spin to fill that kind of shape. Now we don't know if the T goes up like that or if the T goes over like that, but we do know it's a T shape for those 3 cells. So I'm going to pencil mark that, maybe come back to that later. We could do the same thing down here. We have these 2 cells, which is going to see this. Now we don't know if the T shape goes that way or it goes that way, but we know these 3 cells are going to be a T. So you can fill that in. Now this is a little nook and cranny here. To reach that one, you have to come over one, up one. And now you could either have an L like that or an S like that. So typically what I do in this situation where I've narrowed it down to 2 shapes, I'll write the letters in. So S or L. But this brings me to my next tip here is if it's an L like that, what you'll see is it's closed off this area of the grid. And whenever we close off an area of the grid, we have to have enough white cells and multiples of 4 to fit Tetris pieces, right? Otherwise, the Tetris pieces won't fit. So if we count the white cells, we have 4, 8, 12, 14. So 14 white cells. There's no way you're going to fit Tetris pieces in to cover all of them. You're going to isolate a few because it's not a multiple of 4. Therefore, this cannot be an L shape. So therefore, that has to be an S shape like that. So we can put those in, delete my pencil marks. And now we have a square. Squares are easy to catch. I mean, there's nothing else that can fit there, right? An L is going to isolate that one. An I is going to isolate those 2. An S is going to isolate that one, and plus break the rule of 2 shapes being next to each other. So that's got to be a square. We can color that in. Now these 3 are forced. Now it could be an S like that and the T orients sideways, or it could be an L. Not sure if we can figure that out. If it's an S like that and the T comes down, we could fit an L like that. I think that's good. So let's see the other way. If it's an L, yeah, the L's not going to work, and here's why. So if we put an L there, what do you put here? An I is going to isolate this cell down here, so you can't have an I. The only other piece that would fit is an L, and then you'd have 2 L's next to each other. So this cannot be an L, therefore it's an S. We can color that in. Now we know the T is oriented sideways or rotated, however you want to say it. And this is, again, it has to be an L, because if it's an I, we're going to isolate this one. So this here is an L. We can color that in. And here we have a T, right? Again, whenever we have this kind of shape, these 2 cells are going to see this one and this one as well. So all of these 3 cells see this center one. And therefore, there's your 4 cells. There's no way, if you put the T sideways, you're going to isolate this one. There's no other shape. Again, if you've played a lot of Tetris, you'll know, you'll kind of just have that intuition or gut feeling and be able to catch those quickly. But if you do a few of these, you'll catch on. This has to be an eye. Otherwise, we're going to isolate these cells. Right? This cell sees this one no matter what. And this cell sees this one no matter what, and they touch. So if you put a square there, you're going to isolate it. Put an L, you're going to isolate some cells. An S, you're not going to be able to make it work without an I there. So we can make that blue. Now this can either be an L like this or an S like that. So again, typically in this situation, what I do is I'd pencil mark the 2 shapes and then give it some extra thought, or maybe go elsewhere in the grid. But we can use that same strategy of counting white cells. If this is an L, we've closed off this area below, and we have 6 white cells, so that's not going to work. We need a multiple of 4, because again, no Tetris piece is going to go in there and cover all 6 of those white cells. So this can't be an L, therefore it has to be an S. So we can color that green, delete our pencil marks. This has to be an I, otherwise we're going to isolate some cells, right? If we make it an L, these 2 are isolated. If we make it a T, those are isolated. So the only way for this cell to be hit and not isolate the other one is an I, right? If we make it an L like this, congratulations, you filled this cell, but you've now isolated this one. So that's an I. And now here, this cell sees that one. So we could have a T or an S, right? Because an L won't work. Oh, an S won't work because guess what? We have an S to the right, and the S's can't touch one another. An I won't work, right? So no I, no S, no square. There's that black cell there. So this has to be a T. We can color that in. And now this immediately looks like an L to me. Because to hit that cell, you have to hit this one. If you go up, you're going to isolate these. If you make this an S, you're going to isolate that. So this is an L. Now this cell immediately comes up, and we could either make it an S like that, rotate the S like that, or a T. So that's going to be a S or a T. And the same thing up here, it comes down. Either it's going to be an S like that, we can rotate the S like that, or make it a T. So those are going to be S's or T's. And if we make the S like this down here, we're not going to be able to hit all of these white cells, because you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 white cells in this closed area. That's just not going to work. If you make this an L, you're going to isolate that one. Yeah, so this can't be an S this way. If it's the S the other way around, that might work. This is now a T forced that way, because you can't have an S this way and then an S that way. Otherwise, you're going to isolate these 2 cells. So if this is an S, this is a T like that. That's not going to work because you're going to have 2 S's next to each other. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So if this is an S, this would be forced to be a T. You can color that in. And now this is forced to be an S, right? To hit that cell, you have to come up, over, and up, and that forms an S. You'd have 2 S's next to each other. That's no good. So we've counted an S out of here. We can't have an S that way, can't have an S that way. So this is a T. And the only way to have the T work is to have it oriented that way. And now you can see we have a couple of T's next to each other, but those are diagonal. They're not orthogonally adjacent, so that's okay. The shapes just cannot be next to each other up, down, left, or right. So they can't touch orthogonally. So this is forced now to be an S. Because if it were a T, we'd isolate this one cell. So this is an S this way. Color that in. Delete our pencil marks. This is a square. Real clean and easy to fit a square in there. No other shape. You're going to isolate cells if you do any other shape. Right, and I isolates those two. S breaks the two touching rules, plus it isolates that one. T, isolates that one. So that's a square. And now this cell is going to see this cell. And so we can, if we put an I in there, that's going to isolate this one. So an I does not work. A square does not work. A S does not work because then you'd have two T's on top of one another, right? If we finish this, you'll see the two T's would then be touching, and that's just not going to work. So we know it's not going to be an I, S, square. We haven't tried an L, but an L is going to isolate a square. There's no other way to do it. So this has to be a T, which works because an S fits in there and then a T there. So there you have it. Let's color it in and finish this sucker up. And that is a Tetroid puzzle. Lots of fun. I really enjoy it. I'm a big Tetris fan, and I do like object placement puzzles. This was an easier one for sure. There are harder ones. Give it a try in my book, recently published on Amazon. I'll post a link in the description below for you guys. I had a lot of fun making the book, and hopefully you guys have a lot of fun solving it. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like this in the future. Thanks everyone. Have a good night.